You didn't miss the moment. You're standing in it. There's a reason this message found you now, not earlier, not later. In a universe ruled by frequency, what feels like confusion or pause isn't punishment. It's precision. When the old rhythms of your life begin to dissolve and silence wraps around your path like fog, it's not a sign that something has gone wrong. It's a sacred reorganization. And maybe, just maybe, you're not falling behind. You're being reshaped into the very signal that can receive what you once begged for. So take a deep breath. Let your shoulders drop. Feel the quiet between your thoughts. You're not broken. You're becoming. And the timeline that's unfolding is more intelligent than anything your fear could design. You're exactly where the shift begins. Welcome. Before we begin, subscribe if you haven't already, so we can meet again in stories like this. And tell me, where in the world are you listening from tonight? Dim the lights. Make yourself comfortable. Let's begin the story of how the universe wasn't pushing you away. It was pulling you deeper in. There is a moment in every life when the silence becomes too loud to ignore. Not the silence of a quiet room or an empty phone. A different kind. A silence that hums with absence. It arrives softly, disguised as delay or confusion. A friend who pulls away without explanation. The job that never calls back. The dream that once pulsed like a second heartbeat and now sits dull in the corner of your mind. You try to tell yourself it's just a phase, a pause, not a punishment. But deep down, something feels ... unfinished. As if life placed its hand on your shoulder and then walked away without a word. This isn't abandonment, but it feels like it. And in the space where certainty used to live, a question begins to echo. Did I do something wrong? But what if this silence isn't the end of the story? What if it's the page turning? What if you haven't been forgotten, but recalibrated? In quantum terms, there is no such thing as stillness without purpose, no emptiness without instruction. The field, that vast, intelligent sea of potential, doesn't stop listening just because it stops responding. It listens deeper. Beneath your words, beneath your intentions. It listens to your frequency, your emotional signature. Not the one you project when you're being positive. The real one. The one that trembles under your skin when you're lying in bed, eyes wide open, wondering why nothing seems to land anymore. That signal is what the universe mirrors. And here's the secret most never hear. Confusion is not a curse. It's a clearing. A sacred pause between signals. And when your life goes quiet, it doesn't mean you've misaligned. It means the code is updating. What looks like loss is often coherence in disguise. The reordering of timelines to reflect a signal you haven't even fully claimed yet. Somewhere along the way, you asked for more. More peace, more alignment. A life that feels as good as it looks. And in asking, you unknowingly gave the universe permission to begin again. But before a new chapter begins, the old one must release its grip. And this release doesn't always look graceful. Sometimes it looks like isolation. Sometimes like everything familiar slipping out of your hands at once. But what if that was the gift? The letting go wasn't punishment. It was precision. Because the truth is, you can't receive something your body doesn't know how to hold. And before your next life can arrive, your nervous system has to become a space it can live in. You asked for love, but can your breath stay soft when love feels distant? You asked for purpose, but can your shoulders remain dropped when clarity takes its time? You asked for transformation, not realizing it would feel like erosion. This is the strange phenomenon no one prepares you for. Evolution feels like loss until the new signal settles. It feels like static, like the world went blurry and no one told you why. Like waking up in a version of your life that looks the same but sounds different. Like someone moved the furniture of your soul when you weren't looking. You wander through old routines that no longer fit. You say yes out of habit, but your body whispers no. You're not broken. You're not lazy. You're not lost. You're in the gap between timelines. And it's working. We live in a culture that worships clarity, action, and forward motion. But the quantum doesn't obey linearity. It obeys coherence, emotional resonance, truth beneath the surface. It waits until your inner state matches your outer ask. Not as punishment, but as precision. The field is not cruel. It's exact. And this in-between, this strange floating place where things unravel and nothing yet rebuilds. It's not failure. It's the blueprint melting so a new architecture can rise. The blueprint wasn't wrong. It just belonged to an older version of you. A version who knew how to work hard and stay hopeful and perform perfection, but not how to rest into trust. Not yet. You are not meant to manifest by force. You are meant to magnetize by frequency. The softer your signal becomes, the more accurately. Reality reflects it, but soft doesn't mean passive. It means precise. It means emotionally attuned. It means letting your presence speak louder than your plans. Maybe you've noticed it already, the subtle signs of shift, the dreams you can't shake, the coincidences that seem too well-timed, the people falling away, not out of cruelty, but because their frequency no longer matches the broadcast of your becoming. It hurts. You miss them. You try to pull them back into your field, but the magnet no longer recognizes what it used to cling to. This isn't loss. It's alignment. You are shedding the structures that once held you, not because you failed, but because you grew. A butterfly does not mourn the cocoon. It stretches into the air it was born to breathe. But before it flies, it dissolves completely. No wings, no form. Just a thick, sacred soup of memory and potential. That's what you are now. Not a mistake, not a misstep. A miracle mid-process. Let yourself be unmade. Let the silence thicken. Let the plans dissolve. Not forever. Just long enough for the real pattern to reveal itself. The one not born of panic or performance, but of resonance. The one that arrives not because you demanded it, but because you became a place it wanted to land. This is not waiting. This is retuning, and you are not alone in it. There are others walking through the fog beside you. They may not speak your name. They may never sit beside you in a room, but they exist. Souls also shedding, also tuning, also becoming the space for something gentler, wiser, more precise. In the field, you're already connected. And when your signal stabilizes, you will find them. Not through striving, but through stillness. Not through search, but through sync. The universe doesn't reward your effort. It meets your energy. So ask yourself gently, what is my energy saying when no one is watching? When I stop affirming, stop planning, stop striving, what remains? Because that residue is what the field reads. That's your true request, not the journal entry, not the vision board. The hum of your being at rest. And the good news is, you can shift it, not by forcing new thoughts, but by choosing new safety, by letting the nervous system know that peace is not a reward for arrival, it's the path. The more peace you allow now, the more of your future arrives in forms that match. You're not behind. You're being ready. And the timeline you're stepping into requires a version of you that knows how to receive without resistance, trust without proof, and rest without guilt. That version is not somewhere else. It's not a year away. It's not buried beneath more effort. It's here. It's you, without the armor. And the silence that surrounds you? That's not absence. That's the universe holding its breath, waiting for your signal to stabilize. Not because it doubts you, because it loves you that much. Somewhere, in the quiet between what's dissolving and what hasn't yet arrived, a strange, invitation begins to emerge, not as a voice, not even as a thought, but as a gentle tug inside your chest. It's not telling you to act. It's not demanding you move. It's simply asking, what would it feel like to stop resisting this? And that single question, left unanswered but deeply felt, begins to shift your frequency in ways your old self never had language for. There comes a time when becoming no longer looks like striving, but softening. When progress isn't measured by external metrics, but by how gently your body can exist inside uncertainty. This is where the deeper laws of the universe begin to unfold. Not in effort, but in essence. You've been told for so long to chase, to hustle, to earn the life you desire. But what if the life you're calling in can only arrive when you stop performing readiness and start embodying it? What if readiness isn't about how well you plan, but how well you hold space for what you can't control? In the quantum field, every possibility already exists. Each timeline is already formed, complete, whole, and waiting. You're not calling something from the void. You're becoming the frequency that matches a version of reality already alive in the unseen. Your desires aren't wishes. They're coordinates. And your emotional coherence, not your checklist, is what moves you toward them. But coherence isn't built overnight. It requires surrender. It requires sitting still while everything old begs you to dance one last time. The old fears, the old reflexes, the old roles you used to perform just to feel safe. They don't vanish when you evolve. They flare. They rise like ghosts from a burning house, trying to remind you who you used to be. And your work, the quiet, sacred work, is not to banish them, but to see them without merging. To let the fear speak without letting it script your next move. This is emotional maturity at the quantum level. To feel fully, but choose intentionally. Maybe you're noticing this lately. The rise of memories you thought were healed. The reappearance of patterns you swore were behind you. Don't panic. This isn't regression. It's integration. When you start vibrating at a new level, the fragments of your former self don't disappear. They surface, not to sabotage, but to be resequenced. To be held, not obeyed. This is where most people turn back. When the old wounds reappear, they assume they failed. But the field doesn't work in punishment or praise. It works in resonance. And when a new level of wholeness begins to form in you, everything unprocessed must rise to meet it, not to drag you backward, but to anchor you fully in the present. This isn't collapse. It's coherence clarifying itself. The universe isn't testing you. It's tuning you. And tuning can feel like tearing, because the structures you built for survival, the emotional habits, the mental scripts, the relational patterns are being recoded. And when they fall away, it can feel like you're falling. But you're not falling. You're being emptied of contradiction. And the emptier you become of what doesn't serve your next chapter, the more room there is for what this is. Why your life has gone quiet. Why your plans won't land. Why your momentum feels like molasses. Because you're not just shifting behavior, you're shifting identity. And the gap between who you were and who you're becoming is not meant to be filled with effort. It's meant to be honored with trust. You are becoming the version of you that your old self didn't know how to imagine. And becoming doesn't always feel like building. Sometimes it feels like dissolving, like standing in the middle of your life and not recognizing it, like waking up to the realization that what you used to pray for no longer excites you, because it was never aligned with your most coherent self, just your most desperate one. And that realization doesn't make you a failure. It makes you free. You're allowed to outgrow dreams. You're allowed to abandon timelines that no longer sing to your nervous system. You're allowed to disappoint the expectations that were never yours to carry. This is the soft revolution. Becoming yourself without apology. and it requires a strange kind of bravery, not the bold, loud kind that charges into the unknown, but the quiet kind that stays soft in the face of silence, that keeps breathing into spaces that haven't yet revealed their purpose. It doesn't mistake stillness for stagnation, because stillness is not the absence of movement, it's the recalibration of motion to match truth. And in the field of infinite possibility, only aligned motion manifests. sustainably. You may still feel the pull to do something, to fix the static, to make something happen. But what if the most radical act of alignment right now is non-action? What if becoming a match for your future requires you to stop intervening with your old energy, and instead become still enough for the new frequency to fully root? In this stillness, you're not just waiting. You're becoming magnetic. Because coherence is magnetism. It doesn't push, that it doesn't chase, that it doesn't perform, that it simply is. Draws in what reflects its truth, repels what does not, and stays unshaken either way. And this is where the softest power lives, not in your ability to make things happen, but in your ability to become the space where they land naturally, where your presence is no longer a reaction to external circumstances, but a stable signal that reality cannot help but mirror. This isn't passivity, it's sovereignty. You don't have to convince life to love you. You only have to love yourself. Enough to not abandon your alignment when things get quiet. This is what the field responds to. Not perfection. Not performance, but presence. And if you can stay present, not performatively, but truly, during the spaces between certainty, you will become the frequency that reshapes your life from the inside out. You won't have to make it happen. You will simply become the condition in which it naturally arises. And when it does, it won't feel like a miracle. It will feel inevitable. Because it will be. There is a moment, subtle and sacred, when something inside you stops bracing. Not because you received the proof you thought you needed, but because something deeper whispered that peace is no longer negotiable. You don't even notice it at first. Maybe it happens as you're pouring tea, or folding clothes, or watching light move across the floor. A sensation enters your body that doesn't feel like hope. It feels like release, not a declaration, not a dramatic letting go, just an exhale that finally reaches your belly, as if your breath has found permission to settle into the now. That's when the shift begins. The field doesn't respond to affirmation. It responds to integration. And integration begins not with action, but with allowance. The allowance of reality to be exactly as it is without needing to contort yourself to match it. This is the subtle power of alignment, not chasing clarity, but becoming it. You may have spent years trying to embody your future, creating vision boards, repeating mantras, working yourself into exhaustion just to prove your readiness. But embodiment isn't a performance, it's a regulation. It happens not in the mind, but in the body, when the nervous system no longer panics in the presence of uncertainty. And that regulation is what changes your signal. You see, your signal is the sum of your beliefs, your habits, your traumas, your capacity to sit still with discomfort, your willingness to be seen, your ability to self-soothe without collapsing. Your signal is not what you say when you're feeling good. It's what you emanate when life is quiet, when the phone doesn't ring, when no one's clapping for your progress. That's when the field reads you most clearly. And the field doesn't judge. It reflects. It listens not to your words, but to the hum of your frequency, the emotional language underneath your life. So when things slow down, when the emails go unanswered, when the doors stay shut even after you've knocked gently, then loudly, then desperately, that isn't silence. That is signal matching. The field is giving you time to become coherent, to become safe enough, to receive what your mouth has been asking for, but your body has still feared. This is not rejection. It's rhythm. Dot, it's the moment when your external world stops, mimicking your conscious goals, and starts aligning with your inner truth. Even if that truth is still full of contradictions. Maybe a part of you still feels unworthy. Maybe a part of you still expects abandonment. Maybe a part of you doesn't trust that life can be soft and strong at once. That's okay. Coherence doesn't mean perfection. It means integration. And integration includes fear, it includes doubt, it includes softness that shakes, hands that tremble while still reaching forward. You don't have to eradicate every old belief to shift your timeline. You only have to stop acting from them. And that's what this phase of your life is asking of you. Not to be fearless, but to stop letting fear hold the map. Not to be certain, but to stop making choices from panic. Not to be healed, but to stop letting wounds narrate the story. This is quantum healing, not the erasure of pain, but the rewriting of response. Because when your response changes, your resonance changes. And when your resonance changes, the field reorganizes. Not in theory, in reality. You'll notice it in strange ways. You'll walk into a room and feel lighter, though nothing has changed. You'll meet someone new who feels familiar, like a mirror from a forgotten future. You'll say no to something you once begged for and feel relief instead of regret. You'll rest without guilt. You'll pause without panic. You'll create without clutching. This is how the new timeline begins, not with fire and thunder, but with quiet coherence. You become the version of you that no longer begs reality to prove your worth. And in that becoming, the field responds, not because you earned it, but because your signal no longer contradicts your desire. You're no longer broadcasting confusion while asking for clarity. You're no longer vibrating scarcity while visualizing abundance. You're no longer scripting safety while bracing for loss. Your body has caught up with your vision. And so the vision arrives, not as a reward, but as a reflection. You'll look around and realize things feel different. The delays are gone. The grasping is gone. The tightness in your chest, the buzzing in your mind, the chronic urge to explain yourself, all gone. Not because the world became kinder, but because your inner world no longer believes struggle is the path to belonging. You've stopped outsourcing your safety. You've stopped offering performance in exchange for love. You've stopped shrinking your signal to keep others comfortable. And in doing so, you've become sovereign. That sovereignty is what changes everything. Not the kind that isolates you, the kind that stabilizes you. You'll still feel pain, still make mistakes, still get scared. But you'll move differently now, not as someone trying to manipulate life into giving you what you want, but as someone who trusts that what is meant for your most coherent self cannot miss you. And what misses you? That's information, not insult. That's refinement, not rejection. That's the field saying, you're getting warmer. Keep tuning. This is how timelines collapse. Not by urgency, not by resonance, not by making the outcome come faster, not by making yourself feel safer. Now, because the field is not a bank, it's not a judge, it's not a test that's a mirror. And the more clearly you know who you are, the more precisely it reflects you. So who are you? When you stop bracing, who are you? When you stop waiting to be chosen, who are you? When you stop calling delays punishments and start reading them as invitations to coherence, that's the version of you the future is waiting for. Not because it's withholding love until you become her, but because the love that version receives would only confuse the version you are now. It wouldn't land, it wouldn't integrate, it wouldn't hold, because love doesn't just require longing, it requires a body that can hold softness without suspicion, a nervous system that doesn't collapse under safety, a heart that can stay open long, enough to actually receive what it asked for. And that's what this quiet season is doing. It's not breaking you. It's preparing you. It's not denying you. Deconstructing what once stood between you and the life that matches your signal. So let yourself slow down. Let yourself feel the subtle ache of old timelines fading. Let yourself stop pretending you don't need rest. Let yourself weep for the version of you that thought survival meant proving. She's not bad. She's not weak. She's just tired. And she's ready to hand you the map. The map to a life where you don't have to beg for arrival. Where alignment speaks louder than effort. Where being soft, honest, coherent being is enough. You're almost there, not to the future, to yourself. And once you land there, the universe has no choice but to respond. Because the field does not grant wishes. It echoes truths. And your truth, when uncloaked, when embodied, when stabilized, becomes the invitation reality cannot refuse. By now, you've begun to feel it. Not as a breakthrough or grand finale, but as something far quieter. A subtle weight lifting from your shoulders that you hadn't realized you were still carrying. The weight of should, of timelines you absorbed from other people, of expectations that belonged to your culture, your family, your past self, but never to your truth. You thought you needed to finish them to feel whole. But now, strangely, you feel more whole by letting them go unfinished. You haven't given up. You've recalibrated. And that difference is everything. There's a myth we're sold in the world of healing and manifestation, that once you align, everything falls into place. That when you become coherent, only ease will find you. That clarity means comfort. But that's not how reality works. That's not how expansion works. Because every time you raise your signal, every time you're nervous, system stabilizes into a deeper harmony. Life asks you to live from that place, even when old fears still echo. Especially then, the field mirrors what you are, not what you visit occasionally when things feel safe. So yes, you'll still have days where you feel off. You'll still doubt, still fall into comparison, still feel tempted to shrink. But something will be different now. Not the feeling, but your response to it. You'll stop trying to fix it. You'll stop blaming yourself for feeling human. You'll stop measuring your worth in how quickly you bounce back. And in that soft non-resistance, something strange will occur. The signal will rise anyway, because it isn't perfection, the field echoes. It's presence. And presence doesn't require FLAEESSNESS. It requires intimacy. The intimacy of sitting inside your body, not trying to escape it, but truly living in it, as if it were sacred terrain. Not managing symptoms, but listening. Not correcting your emotions, but honoring them. Not making joy your currency, but making gentleness your practice. And that gentleness is what your future responds to. Because all timelines are already written, but only one is tuned to the version of you who no longer needs the universe to hurry. Only one resonates with the you who doesn't chase the miracle, but lives like it's already integrated. That doesn't mean pretending, it means practicing, living each small moment like it matters, not to prove anything, but because your energy teaches the field what's normal for you. And if you can normalize peace, even for 30 seconds at a time, you start shifting everything. This is not about becoming superhuman. It's about becoming soft enough to stay human and stay open while doing so. That's what most people misunderstand about alignment. It's not an achievement. It's a relationship. Between you and life, between your nervous system and the quantum field. Between the signal you broadcast and the invitation reality hears. When you deepen that relationship, you stop begging for signs. Because life itself becomes the conversation. A stranger holds the door and your heart flickers. A lyric finds you at the exact moment a doubt forms. An old journal surfaces, and you realize the thing you were trying to manifest was never what you truly wanted. It was just the only shape your fear could imagine safety taking dot. And in those moments, the universe doesn't speak in lightning, dot, it speaks in echoes. Echoes of your new coherence. And those echoes confirm not that you're doing everything right, but that you stop needing proof in order to keep being you. That's when the loop ends. That's when you stop manifesting from emptiness and start receiving from wholeness. But make no mistake, even this phase is not the final destination, because your signal will continue to evolve, not in a straight line, but in spirals, dot. And each spiral will test not your strength, but your softness. Can you remain gentle when a new timeline stretches you in unfamiliar ways? Can you remain honest when an old habit flares up and pretends it's just being realistic? Can you remain quiet enough to hear your own signal beneath the noise of other people's urgency? Because urgency is the last shell of your old self. It's the frequency of not enough. Of it has to happen now, or I'm behind. But behind what? Behind who? There is no cosmic clock ticking down the seconds to your fulfillment. There is only readiness. There is only resonance. There is only this moment and your willingness to meet it without bracing. The most magnetic version of you is not the one who forces momentum. It's the one who embodies sufficiency. The one who doesn't perform deserving. The one who knows timing is not a threat. And that version of you, the one who no longer panics when things are quiet, who no longer chases alignment, but lives inside it. She isn't far. She's already inside you. In the breath you take. When you pause before reacting. In the choice to rest even when the dishes aren't done. In the decision to speak truth even if it makes someone else uncomfortable. In the way you now make room for life to meet you halfway. You used to fill every silence with action. Now you let the silence shape you. And the shape it gives you, it's not defined by edges. It's defined by signal. By the quiet resonance of someone who knows they are allowed to take up space. Not by pushing. By presence. You've become someone who no longer uses effort to feel safe. You've become someone who no longer bends to urgency like it's gospel. You've become someone who no longer fears the void. And in doing so, you've become the match for a life that moves at the speed of trust. That's why the right people stay now. Why the right timing unfolds without needing to be forced. Why the things that once resisted you now arrive as if they'd been waiting all along. Because they were waiting for you to stop gripping the old signal. They were waiting for you to believe in your own enoughness, not in words, but in posture, in pause, in patience. They were waiting for the quiet within you to become loud enough to speak for itself. You don't have to manifest your future anymore. You are already living inside the signal of it. And every breath you take without urgency. Every step you take without tension. Every moment you choose presence over panic tunes the world around you into the version of reality that already matches your truth. This isn't magic. It's resonance. It's quantum. Love, coded in frequency. And you, at last, have become the clear channel through which it arrives. There's a certain kind of softness that takes years to earn, not because it's hard to find, but because everything you've ever been taught about, safety, was built on the opposite: tension, urgency, acceleration. For so long, safety meant control, predictability, certainty. But now you know, none of those things were safety. They were performance. They were scaffolding to hold up a self who didn't yet feel safe resting in their own frequency. Now, your nervous system recognizes something truer. It knows that safety isn't stillness in your circumstances. It's stillness in your presence. You don't need life to slow down for you anymore. You are the slowness. You're not trying to calm your environment. You've become the field through which calm arrives. This is the beginning of quiet authority, a state where your choices are no longer reactions to fear, but expressions of resonance. You used to ask, when will it arrive? Now you ask, is my body ready to hold what I'm calling in? And if it isn't, you don't panic. You pause. You don't self-attack. You self-regulate. You don't interpret delay as rejection. You read it as refinement. This is what emotional maturity looks like when viewed through the quantum lens. It's not about erasing desire. It's about making sure your desire doesn't wear the mask of anxiety. Because when you vibrate from panic, everything that comes will ask you to sustain it with that same panic. But when you vibrate from sufficiency, everything that comes will reflect that wholeness back to you. This is what you've been learning in the quiet. How to stop sourcing your frequency from outcomes. How to stop outsourcing your safety to people's responses. How to stop mistaking noise for movement and start measuring expansion by the ease in your breath. It's no longer about what's coming. It's about how you are while it comes. And you've become soft enough to receive it. The universe responds to clarity. But clarity isn't a thought. It's a tone, an internal harmony. And yours has shifted. Your coherence is now stable. Enough to stop asking for reassurance. You trust the process not because you have evidence, but because you are the evidence. Your breath, your gentleness, your capacity to hold discomfort without collapsing, your ability to let love in without dissecting it. Your presence is now a signal strong enough to carry timelines into reality. And here's what most people don't realize. Timelines don't arrive. You merge with them. You don't attract a new reality. Become it. And the becoming is invisible at first. It looks like long walks with no answers. Like sleeping deeply for the first time in years. Like saying no even. When your voice trembles like doing nothing and feeling more you than when you did everything. Like sitting in a room and feeling your future brush up against your skin like light. Not something you chase, but something you feel in your bones. You stop looking ahead because you realize you're already inside the new dimension. The colors feel different. The pace feels kinder. Your thoughts don't spiral. They settle. This isn't a fantasy. It's frequency. And frequency isn't measured in speed or brightness. It's measured in stability. The most aligned version of you isn't the one who feels good all the time. It's the one who feels everything and stays kind. To yourself, to the moment, to the people who don't yet understand what you've become, because you no longer need to be understood in order to feel grounded. That's the deepest shift of all. Before, you needed life to confirm your evolution. Now, your evolution is the confirmation. You no longer plead with the field to bring you peace. You're already at peace. And so the field brings you what peace calls for. You no longer search for proof of progress. You're already progressing, just by existing without the armor you once called necessary. You no longer chase identity. You live as signal. And the signal doesn't need to speak. It emanates. You walk into rooms differently now. You say less, but your energy speaks volumes. You try less, but more aligns. Not because you hacked the system, but because you stopped manipulating your way into timelines that weren't truly yours. You've stopped needing to be ready because you realize readiness was never a finish line. It was a frequency, and you're already vibrating at it. That's why rest feels productive now. That's why spaciousness no longer scares you. That's why relationships that used to feel magnetic now feel noisy. You're not too sensitive. You're just finally able to hear your own field clearly. And from this clarity, choices become obvious. The people meant for you feel safe without explanation. The work you're here to do feels like a return, not an effort. The opportunities you once chased now feel like they were circling the perimeter of your coherence, just waiting for an open window. This is not magic. This is how reality works when you no longer betray your own presence. Your presence is the portal. Your stillness is The signal. Your gentleness is the guide. This is why you don't have to cling to hope anymore. You are the hope, materialized, embodied, vibrating in a body that no longer needs fixing to be worthy of arrival. You've remembered how to stay, not in places that harm you, but in moments that ask for your full witness. You've remembered that evolution is not a punishment for your former self, but a prayer answered through her. You've remembered that safety isn't the absence of pain. It's the presence of integration. And you've remembered that your pace, soft, strange, and non-linear, is not a flaw in the system. It is the system. So now, when fear visits, you don't collapse. You listen. You breathe. You hum back a tone that says, "We're safe now." You don't have to run. And slowly, even fear begins to trust you. This is the final frontier of Pause. Coherence. When even your resistance stops resisting you. When even your doubt begins to dissolve in the spaciousness of your trust. When even your longing stops screaming because it finally feels heard. And that's when the miracles begin. Not because they're dramatic, but because they're soft, gentle, obvious, that they feel like, of course. They feel like this always belonged to me. They feel like the future you used to beg for, now humming in the walls of your home, sitting with you as you sip your morning tea, breathing with you as you write, or walk, or smile at nothing. In particular, they feel like you, uninterrupted. And that's all you ever wanted. Not a new reality, but the ability to stay in the one that finally fits. There is a threshold you eventually cross where you no longer ask, when will it happen? Not because you've given up, but because the question itself dissolves. It doesn't occur to you anymore that life could withhold from you. You understand now that reality is not a storehouse of blessings to be rationed, nor a test you must pass. It is a mirror, always only reflecting the frequency you are living as in this moment. And when that understanding roots itself, not in your mind, but in your body, urgency becomes impossible. The future you longed for is no longer an object you chase. It is a field you are already inhabiting, a tone vibrating in your chest, a softness woven into your breath. In this phase, miracles stop looking like fireworks. They look like inevitabilities. You notice it when conversations flow with no effort, when synchronicities become ordinary, when rest no longer feels like a crime, but a contribution. You begin to realize this is what alignment was always meant to feel like. Not dramatic, but natural. Not something you squeeze into being, but something that unfolds because you finally stopped gripping. And in the ordinary moments, the magic is clearest. Waking in the morning without the buzzing of dread, pouring water into a glass, and feeling as though even this simple act is met by the entire field bending toward you in rhythm. Saying no without apology, yes without grasping. Walking through the day without needing evidence to justify your trust. This is coherence, not a peak state, but a steady hum. The hum of a nervous system that has finally learned to stay open long enough for love to land, for opportunities to root, for joy to feel safe instead of suspicious. And yet, even here, your mind may try to pull you back into the old rhythm. What if I lose this? What if it doesn't last? But now you see that fear for what it is. An echo of a past self who only knew survival, who believed safety was conditional, who thought she had to cling or she would be abandoned. You no longer merge with that echo. You thank her, you breathe with her, but you do not hand her the reins. Because you know now, alignment is not fragile. It is not a mood you have to protect. It is the most natural state of your being, and the field will always call you back to it, again and again, until it becomes not a practice, but your home. This is why manifestation, as people describe it, often feels hollow. It is not about wanting harder, scripting longer, or visualizing brighter. It is about becoming safe enough to live in the frequency of what you desire, Not someday, not in ritual, but now, in the small, ordinary textures of your life. If you want peace, can you feel your shoulders soften as you sit in traffic? If you want love, can you let your chest stay open, even when the room feels indifferent? If you want abundance, can you breathe deeply, even when numbers wobble? These are not tests, they are invitations. Invitations to embody the signal now, so that the timeline you seek has a place to land without distortion. And slowly, you notice, it is landing. Not in dramatic waves, but in steady arrivals. The conversations that matter appear. The people who resonate stay. The work that feels aligned emerges without struggle. The timelines that once slipped away now root themselves in your field, not because you begged, but because you finally became a steady enough presence to hold them. The beauty of this stage is that you no longer need to chase certainty. You are certainty. You no longer need to ask for signs. You are the sign. You no longer need to measure your progress by outcomes. The ease in your breath is enough. The way you no longer collapse under silence is enough. The way you trust the void as birthplace instead of exile, that is progress no evidence can surpass. You've become magnetic not by force, but by truth. And the universe cannot help but mirror that dot here. You begin to see that nothing was ever wasted. Every delay was calibration. Every silence was instruction. Every loss was refinement. You were not being punished. You were being tuned. And the moments you thought were endings were simply your field discarding the frequencies it could no longer carry. Nothing abandoned you. Everything rearranged itself around you, so that when you finally stood in your own coherence, the reality you asked for could find its way home. And perhaps the greatest shift of all is this: you stop needing to prove your worthiness to receive. You understand now that worthiness was never in question. The only question was alignment. And alignment is no longer something you strive for. It is who you are. You embody it in the way you move through each day, in the pauses you allow, in the softness you extend to yourself, in the way your presence no longer contradicts your desires. And in that harmony, life becomes simple again. Clear, uncomplicated, not because it lacks challenge, but because you no longer meet challenge with contraction. You meet it with breath, with coherence, with a signal that says, even here, I am enough. This is the essence of becoming. Not a destination, not a reward, but a frequency you live as moment by moment. And as you continue, you realize the most miraculous thing of all. You're not waiting anymore. You are already living the life you thought was far away. Not because the world transformed overnight, but because you did. Because your field changed. Because your signal stopped contradicting itself. And now, reality has no choice but to rearrange itself in rhythm with the truth you've become. And as you sit with that, in the quiet of your own presence, you realize this was never about getting anywhere. It was always about becoming the version of you who could finally recognize that you were never behind, never broken, never abandoned. You were only being shaped. And now, at last, you are living as the signal you once prayed for. By the time you arrive here, the world hasn't necessarily changed in obvious ways. The streets look the same. The sky carries its familiar weight. The people around you continue their patterns. But something unmistakable has shifted. You no longer walk through reality as a beggar hoping for scraps of grace. You walk as a mirror of coherence, knowing that every glance, every conversation, every silence is part of a dialogue with the field. The difference is not what you see, but how you feel what you see. A delay no longer unsettles you. An absence no longer frightens you. A detour no longer convinces you of failure, because now you understand every turn is a reflection, not a rejection. And when you breathe into that awareness, Life bends toward you with an intimacy you once thought you had to earn. There was a time when you called this process manifestation. But manifestation always carried the subtle flavor of distance, of something out there, waiting to be pulled in by effort or ritual. What you live now is not manifestation. It is recognition. Recognition that the reality you longed for was never separate, only inaccessible while you vibrated as its opposite. Now, there is no pulling in. There is only merging. You live inside the signal you once thought you had to chase. It colors the smallest choices, saturates your presence, seeps into every conversation. And because of this, the field responds not occasionally, but constantly. Echoing the stability you've become. It shows up in love first, often in the quietest ways. Not necessarily through grand romance, though that may come too, but in the soft magnetism of relationships that feel like rest instead of performance. People who once drained you fall away, not through conflict, but through silence that feels natural, inevitable, like the closing of a chapter that no longer belongs. In this book, and the ones who remain, they stay not because you bend yourself into shapes that please them, but because your signal resonates with theirs. You no longer tolerate connections built on urgency or pretense. Your body knows the difference now, and your presence refuses to betray itself for temporary company. This is not loneliness. It is resonance. And resonance draws the right ones near. It shows up in your work too, not as sudden fame or fortune, but as clarity. The tasks that once felt heavy lose their grip. The ideas that once scattered now arrive in order. The opportunities that once slipped away now find you without struggle. You no longer beg to be seen. You see yourself, and so the field mirrors that recognition. Your work becomes not a strategy for survival, but an expression of coherence, a way for your frequency to take form in the physical. And this is why it grows, not because you push harder, but because it is alive. Living work expands naturally, just as aligned relationships deepen naturally. Life stops feeling like something you have to manage and starts feeling like something you converse with. The beauty of this stage is that nothing feels forced anymore. Even the challenges arrive differently. Where once they carried sharp edges of panic, now they feel like invitations. A conflict doesn't throw you into collapse. It teaches you where your coherence is still soft. A financial wobble doesn't spiral you into scarcity. It asks you to breathe deeper into sufficiency. A loss doesn't send you into despair. It reveals what your field is no longer aligned with. You stop reading pain as punishment. You begin reading it as refinement. And when you do, even suffering transforms into signal. The strangest thing about this way of living is how natural it becomes. At first, coherence felt like a state you had to fight for, a peak experience you had to maintain with effort. Now it feels like home, like gravity, like something you would have to fight against to lose. Your nervous system has finally rewritten its code. Safety no longer means control. Safety means presence. And presence is always available, in every moment, no matter what. That is why the field bends so easily now. Because you are no longer broadcasting static. You are broadcasting clarity. And clarity does not shout. It hums. And this hum changes everything. The people who meet you feel it before they hear your words. The opportunities that arrive feel drawn in by a gravity they can't name. The circumstances that once resisted you now unfold as though they were always meant to. Not because you are lucky, not because you are favored, but because you have become coherent. And coherence is magnetic. There is no going back from this. Not because you've reached perfection, but because once your body tastes the safety of coherence, it cannot forget it. Old patterns may whisper, but they no longer seduce. Old fears may surface, but they no longer govern. Old timelines may beckon, but they no longer fit. You've outgrown them, and life knows it. That's why it keeps opening in front of you, again and again, with more clarity, more intimacy, more inevitability. Perhaps the most liberating truth at this stage is that you stop needing to ask, am I aligned? The question itself disappears, because alignment is no longer something you chase. It is simply who you are. You no longer perform readiness. You embody it. You no longer seek validation. You radiate it. You no longer hope for belonging. You live as belonging itself. And when you do, reality can only mirror that truth back to you. This is what it means to live as frequency, not to try harder, not to pretend, not to perform, simply to become gently, consistently, inevitably, the signal of the life you once thought you had to earn. And when you become it, life doesn't delay. Life responds. Always. And so you arrive here, not at the finish line of becoming, but at the quiet recognition that you were never late, ever behind, never abandoned. The universe was not testing you. It was tuning you, softening the static, unraveling the noise, dissolving the scaffolding of urgency until only the hum of your true frequency remained. What once looked like silence was alignment writing itself into your bones. And what once felt like loss was simply the shedding of timelines too small for the signal you now carry with ease. You don't have to prove anything, not to yourself, not to the field. You only have to keep breathing, keep softening, keep letting your presence speak the language of trust. And as you do, reality will continue to mirror the coherence you've become, not as miracle, but as inevitability. So rest in this truth. You are exactly on time, and the life you once longed for is already here, pulsing through your presence. If these words find you in stillness, subscribe to our channel so we can meet again. And remember, other stories are waiting for you, just as the field is, always listening, always responding, always rearranging itself around you.